my honor to introduce to you one of my best friends. I know so much about him that there's a lot I just can't tell you. So I'm going to keep it. I hear this is a family gathering, so I'm going to keep it as such. Seriously, when I think of Antonio as my friend, and Antonio, I'm serious about this, I think about three words. One is vision, two is leadership, and three is courage. And some of you might say, oh, come on, that's a little thick. But let me describe to you what I'm talking about. Vision. He had a vision for a transportation system in the city of LA. And the so-called experts said, well, Mr. Mayor, you know, that's going to take 30 years, what you want to do. He said, absolutely not. You have to do it in 10. So he developed what's known as the 30-10 plan. And he just wouldn't listen. So some of these, I'll be nice, bureaucrats said, well, that's fine, but how are we going to pay for it? He said, we'll put a measure on the ballot, Measure R, and get it passed, and we'll pay for this. Well, Mr. Mayor, actually, that's going to take a 2/3 vote, 66% in a difficult economy. And he said, I don't care, I'm putting it on, and they're going to pass it. They rolled their eyes, didn't believe it. And on the credibility of the mayor of Los Angeles, it got more than 66%, and the projects that you see got funded. Credit to Mayor Garcetti, now Ambassador Garcetti. He openly says today, and not too many electeds talk well about another elected, he said, all the cranes you see and all the jobs you see in this city today are because of Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. Leadership. He was the mayor, if you remember, in the worst recession ever in the history of Los Angeles. But Antonio didn't hide. He didn't get behind press releases. He didn't have people speaking for him. He went and faced the unions. He faced the employees and told them how it was going to be and that we were going to work together and get through this terrible recession. And by the way, along the way in this recession, he managed to reduce crime to a level that we still haven't seen yet in the city of Los Angeles. How about a hand for that? Courage. He says to me, and he made an announcement, I'm going to take over LA Unified. Antonio, with all due respect, it's not within your scope. And I don't think you can, well, I don't care. I'm going to take over LA Unified. Man, oh man, I think he's lost his rocker. Right? I said, why do you want to do that? He said, the district is failing our kids. Almost 50% in Los Angeles were dropping out of high school, not college, high school. And he wouldn't let up. He went after it, introduced legislation, wasn't successful, but guess what? He forced LA Unified to get their act together, and graduation rates went straight up somewhere between 80 to 90% graduation. What do you think about that? Courage. So Dr. Fernando Guerra, Loyola Marymount University, said to me, history will judge Antonio as one of the greatest mayors in the history of Los Angeles. And then this is exactly why Governor Newsom appointed him. And I think Adon had some fancy title. I like czar. The czar of infrastructure. I just think it fits him so well. And what does that mean? It means that Mayor Villaraigosa was selected because Gavin Newsom said when Antonio was mayor, he brought more money to the city of Los Angeles than any city in the entire United States of America. And I want him to do that for the state of California. That's why he appointed the mayor. What does that mean to you today? It means that he understands where we are in water infrastructure. It means that he knows how to prioritize, work with you, listen to you. We were at a luncheon earlier where he was talking about that. And it means that he knows how to get it funded. And that is why he is the czar. I love that. And why he's our keynote speaker today. I introduce to you Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa.
Well, thank you all. And really, you guys are doing something right that I've said to virtually everywhere I've gone. You know, that adage that all politics is local, it's true. When I was Speaker of the Assembly, I made sure that LA got its fair share. But it's also, when taken to the extreme, doesn't take advantage of the leveraging we all have to do. So what you're doing today, you know, 3 counties, I think it was first 2 of you, and now it's 3 of you, and I mentioned you should bring in the Inland Empire, the Imperial Valley, the fact, well, and Kern, because so much of their water comes from here in Fresno. What you're doing here is smart. When you look at how you get resources, you row in the same direction together. I do a rowing machine every hour, every day for an hour. And you got to all row in the same direction. So 1, kudos to you, that 1, that you're as committed as you are to be here on Friday afternoon, but 2, that you're thinking beyond just LA County, Orange County, San Diego County. You're figuring out this is a region. This is a megalopolis, and you gotta act like that. You gotta bring all your agencies together and all your electeds together, because too often, them thinking all politics is local, if they're an Orange County Congress member, they're focused on Orange County. If they're a San Diego Congress member, they're doing the same thing, and on and on. So that's 1, kudos to all of you. I want to go through a little bit of what the IIJA, which is the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act, which, you know, I've been given. He announced me, by the way, it was kind of cute. The governor, when he announced me, they had on the thing, call him infrastructure advisor. And then just to, I think, you know, get his staff, he said, czar. And so that's how it started off. But they keep on saying infrastructure advisor, which is fine, because I work for the governor and the state. But the IIJ, what people don't realize about it, from the state has made a historic investment. No state matched what the feds were going to give us. The state has allocated $47 billion for this infrastructure, and formula-wise, we're getting about $50 billion from the feds, and if we're smart and put forward the best projects, it could be up to $60 billion. So we're looking at about $100 to $110 billion of infrastructure. Never in this period of time as this state ever had that kind of money. So the first question I asked the governor's office when, you know, we were all excited about it, I said to them, do we even have the staff to approve $110 billion worth of projects? Everybody looked glazed over and realized we don't. When I went to the feds, I said the same thing. Meeting with the department, Buttigieg wasn't there, but all his team of about 20 people there. And I said to them, do you have the staff to let $1.2 trillion worth of contracts? And the answer was, you know, same, you know, none of us do. So one of the things I said early on is we've got to increase the staff to approve these contracts. Now, the governor didn't say to me exactly what he wanted, but we had debated multiple times, and I knew that we had some, you know, agreement on some of the stuff that we have to do. All he said was, we have to break the glass. Well, someone who's broken a few glass ceilings now, I knew what he wanted. He wanted to be disruptive. And so we went from the Oregon border to the Mexican border, meeting, more than 1,000 stakeholders. And when I mean, water agencies, transportation agencies, construction companies, environmental groups, labor was always present at all of these meetings. About 1,000 stakeholders from the north to the south. And I'd start out, and the first thing I said was, we built a football stadium in LA, or Inglewood. I love that someone, I tried to bring the football team downtown and then was gone, and by the time we got it, it went to Inglewood. But so we tried to we did a football stadium in Inglewood, and we limited lawsuits to 267 days. You all know about that, right? Particularly the people concerned about CEQA. Well, how come they got it and we don't? Built a basketball arena in Sacramento and did the same thing. So I said early on, and I'm going to tell you, with 1,000 stakeholders we've met, no one has objected to these 3 main points. I said, if we could do it for a football stadium and a basketball arena, why wouldn't we limit lawsuits to the same 267 days? Because some of you know, it could be 10 years to build a project in this state. Same 267 days that you did for a football stadium. And virtual unanimity wherever we went that is something we have to do. Second thing I said, everybody remember the Northridge earthquake? Pete Wilson, governor. I worked with Pete. I was mayor. I was speaker of the assembly. Adon, you were talking about how old you are, son. A couple of us a little older than that. 38 years, 25 years ago, I was speaker of the assembly. For those of you, who might know, might remember. And one of the things we said with Pete, I tell people, when that 10 freeway, the Santa Monica freeway went down, anybody who's ever worked on a freeway knows that's a 2-year, 3-year, 5-year project, who knows, given how difficult it is. Pete did design build, or progressive design build, I don't know which one, it might have been progressive design build, but did alternative delivery method. He put incentives. He said, if you build it in X period of time, I'll pay you more. But every day you go after that, you're going to start paying me. Built it in 2 months and 5 days. Do you remember Karma Heaven? No, you don't. Because all of you called it Karmageddon. Everybody said when I extended the 405 that it was going to be, craziness. I said, not under my watch. We went to the legislature because I don't know if you know, you can't just do design build without legislative approval, because Caltrans tends to do most of those projects, almost all of those projects. And so I went 1-by-1 vote with an 84% approval rating, and a former speaker only 1-by-1 vote in each house. But we got the authority. Then I said, we had to do alternative delivery methods can speed up a lot of this process. So I said, design build, progressive design build, job order contracting, construction management, PM, and then something novel that we don't do. Actually, we don't do in the United States of America very often, but they do it around the rest of the world. The red states do it more than us, and we could do it too, and that's public-private partnerships. That's a way to get that 110 billion, who knows, maybe 120 billion, 125, if the private sector's engaged with us. So the second piece was, let's get authority to do alternative delivery methods that can speed up these projects. And when you speed up a project? Reduce the cost. Third, when we did Karma Heaven, early on, everybody said, well, we got the county, we got Caltrans, we got the city. We all have to streamline permitting. So I put on dashboards, we laid out all the things that we had to do. Well, project started slowing down. I find out it's slowing down because of the Department of Water and Power. Not your side, you were doing water. We weren't relocating the poles fast enough. So I had to bring in the, person running, the general manager, bring him in and said, if you want to keep your job, you're going to put a team of people that are going to streamline, because it's embarrassing when the state and the MTA tells me that what's holding up the project is my agency. So the third thing we said was, and I'm a big foodie, and whenever I'd go to San Francisco, New York, DC, Paris, wherever, I'd always, I'd say to a great chef, I want you to come to LA. And every time they said, I wouldn't go to LA because it takes 2.5 years to open up a restaurant. I checked it out. When I found that out, I said, why? Because you have to go to 12 different departments to open up anything in LA. So I took those 12 different departments and I took them to one, and we went from 2.5 years to 6. So what I said to the state and to the stakeholders we've met, if we want to cut the cost, we got to break down the silos, and we've got to make sure that we got a war room, and we're moving these projects along and making sure that the agency over broadband, which you're putting while you're doing a freeway or a light rail project, are talking to one another, and that they're all streamlining. And if you get a quarter of our money, you gotta streamline as well. You gotta have a war room streamlining as well. We put together, I said to them, we gotta have dashboards on all this, internal dashboards, external. I got that idea. The business people here would probably be surprised, but when I first got elected mayor, I didn't know who, not Boston Consulting, who's the other one? I didn't know who McKinsey was. When someone said, boss, right after my inauguration speech, he said, boss, I brought in some people here. And I said, who are they? And they said, McKinsey. And I said, who's that? He said, they're a consulting group. Why do we need them? Because you made 100 campaign promises? And we're going to put dashboards and people on all of them. By the way, 60% increase in the graduation rate, from 44% to 72 when I left, and it's now at 85, you're right. 49% drop in violent crime. Went from the most violent big city in America to the safest big city with New York. A little less safe than New York. They have 35,000 cops, I had 9. Thank you very much. #1 American city in reducing carbon emissions, built more light rail than anybody in the world in that 8-year period of time. We were focused, but we had people, metrics. So I laid out we've recommended, and by the way, I see Micah, where's Micah at? Can you stand up? Micah Weinberg and California Forward have been absolutely instrumental, because when I got this job, czar, no staff, just me. And, I knew that if it was just me, I'd give a nice speech, but that was about it. So brought in, California Forward, we brought them in. And I brought in Boston Consulting, because I had used, after I learned from McKinsey, I brought in Boston Consulting for the Clean Truck program at the port. The LA port, by the time I left, was the cleanest, greenest big port in the world. And it still is, because I just met with the 2 port directors this morning. Still is, by a lot, the cleanest, greenest. Now, if we had some of this other stuff, we'd be able to build a lot more and be clean and green and grow. So the fourth thing that's really critical to all this, and especially the places in Southern California where we have such high poverty rates. You know, the politicians love to say that we're the fourth largest economy in the world, and we are. We also have the highest effective poverty rate in the United States of America. We have the highest housing costs in the United States of America. You know, people that work every day, you know, like I worked at a nonprofit at 25, I bought a home because I had been saving since I was a kid. You could buy a home back then. You know, our kids can't buy a home unless Papa and Mama are helping them. You know, or they're 38 now instead of 25, when a lot of us bought a home back then. So the fourth piece that I want you to really think about is equity and inclusion. It's all over the IIJA. Why? Because we know historically, when we build infrastructure, let me give you, those of you who know Los Angeles a little bit, East LA, got 5 freeways there. You heard of Santa Monica Boulevard? You know Santa Monica Boulevard, most of you, right? Okay, Santa Monica Boulevard was going to be a freeway. But, you know, West Hollywood and Beverly Hills would have it. So part of what the IIJA says is we can't overbuild in poor areas. But if you have a project that's going to benefit a poor area, you ought to get a leg up. You ought to be advantaged, because we want to make sure that we leverage this infrastructure to rebuild communities and to lift people up. I love to tell this story. When I first did, because it wasn't just Measure R. I chaired every bond. We were the most overcrowded school district in America. We built more schools than anybody in the world in that period of time. The light rail, the port, we hadn't done anything at the airport since 1984. We put $4.5 billion and another $14 billion to do the plan at that airport. It's too darn congested, why we need to do some congestion pricing, and we're doing the light rail into the airport to change things. But at the end of the day, we were focused on infrastructure, but we were also focused on lifting people up. So let me tell you what this infrastructure can do. I made sure when I did 126 project labor agreements, which was more than the entire country together, I wasn't just for unions. I said, hey, I want to see the face of these unions change a bit, everybody. You know, no women. There were no blacks, very few blacks on construction sites when I became mayor. By the time we were finished, 2,500 black apprentices. By the time we were finished, the Latinos, which you see everywhere in the construction site, except they're mostly laborers. They're not operating engineers. They're not, you know, pipe fitters. They're not electricians. I said, that's got to change. Everybody should be able to participate. We did a thing called local hire. And we said, you know, because I'd go to construction sites and I'd ask people, where are you from in LA? Oh, I'm from Temecula. Oh, I'm from Arizona. Swear to you. All these people on our construction sites, and they weren't from, you know, Orange County. I mean, they weren't from our area. So this policy says we're going to hire locally. And this is the story. I met a guy named Tiny. I'd call him Tiny. He was about 6'2", big giant muscles, you know, like this. And every time he'd see me, he'd say, I'm an electrician now because of you. And he'd pick me up in the air because he'd come to every he'd pick me up in the air, literally, with one arm. Pick me up in the air, and I'd say, can you let me down? He'd let me down. Thank you, Tiny. Toward the end, he started doing that after the 4th year I was there, and he'd come to all the big, because the unions always came whenever we did a big project. One day he comes in, and he says to me, you know, with a young woman, he says, I want you to know, because of my job, I just bought a house. And he says, as you know, I had been in prison for, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years, whatever it was, and I'm finally reunited with my daughter. And he started to cry. That's what a good job can do to a man or a woman and a family. This $110 billion has the opportunity to leverage the infrastructure that we so badly need. But if we do like we've done before, and this is what I've told all the legislators and the governor's office, if we do it, that 110 billion is going to be more like 70. Because we just take too long to build, it costs too much. One more piece. When I was mayor, early on, I got told, well, we have CEQA, and then we have NEPA. And I knew we have the most vigorous environmental review in the country. So I said, well, why do we do that one first and that one second? And how much time does that add to a project, and how much extra does it cost? Well, as you know, 2-3 years it adds, and depending on the project, X percentage to the cost. I was able to get NEPA and CEQA done concurrently instead of consecutively. And a few years later, Caltrans got it, but we were the first to get it. That's why LA went from 16th in transportation money, the second largest city in the country, 16th to number 1 by a lot. We did concentric circles. We had this big, we started out like this, Minneapolis, I mean, all these little tiny towns had, bigger circles than us. By the time we were done, we had most of California. Because we leveraged, because we streamlined, because we focused on moving these projects faster. The 30-10, as you said. And you know where I got the idea? I got the idea thinking I'd pass Measure R, I was going to do these, town halls, and I was going to get an applause. And people said, where's your subway to the sea? You ran on that. And angry. And I'm saying, well ma'am, Tom Bradley ran on building the first subway, and he ran in 1973, and it got built in 93. I know, because I was on the board when we opened it up. I said, these things don't happen overnight, but they gave me an idea. And so I told the smart people around me, how do we do 30 years of funding in a 10-year period of time? Figure it out. And they did. And we did. So that's what, is essentially part of the recommendations of California Forward that I and Boston Consulting have put together. We're going to do it through budget trailers. We initially thought we were going to do it through legislation, so we put it together in January. What I'd say to you is that I expect that they're going to do a big chunk of it. I don't know how much of it. They've already said alternative delivery methods will be in there. They've already said capping lawsuits will be in there. And they're already streamlining. I'm meeting with all the agency heads, and we've taken broadband as an example from 33 months to 16 months, and we want to take it down to 11. So we're already moving along that. The dashboards are coming up, so the public, and so that internally we can drive this, and so externally the public knows what we're doing. Now, water. This is a water, summit, and 70% of this money is going to transportation. And what's crazy, as much as they talk about climate change, on the same 80-20 split that we've always had, 80 for highways, 20 for transit. Doesn't make any sense, but that was what the feds gave us. So 70% is going to transportation. The rest of the 30% to energy, water, and broadband. And I've said to the governor's office 1,000 times, the area, most underfunded area, was the water area. And I believe that we have to put some kind of plan that we can get McCarthy behind. And I think, I have some ideas about that. Some kind of plan to get McCarthy behind giving us some more water. And that will primarily benefit, his area, but that's a very important area, as you all know, with respect, because if the Colorado River agreement ends up happening, they're probably going to get hurt the most. So with respect to water, I'm not a water expert, did run an agency, but what I wanted to give you was the broad brush of what we're recommending and what I expect, will happen that will cut the cost, accelerate these projects, and really give the reason why we were able to pass Measure M afterwards is because people actually got to see the projects. When they take 15 years down the line, I used to joke with the former mayor. I said, I love it. I did this whole plan, and you're just cutting all the ribbon, man. And I didn't get to participate in any of it. And at the end of the day, when you can accelerate projects, put people to work, you're able to convince people, wow, that my money does have a dividend at the end of the rainbow. And, show that, this state can be a little more business friendly, because I think we all agree, and, I've said it before, so some people don't like hearing it, but it's not the most business friendly state, in the country. And I think that's an understatement. I think we all know that. At the end of the day, if we're going to get more water, we got to go in together. And we got to go in smarter. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the Colorado deal, but I know this. We conserve more than the rest of those states do. We have superior water rights, and one could argue maybe they're outdated, but we do have superior water rights. And we ought to get some credit for the fact that we're working together. But when we're working at cross purposes, when Imperial can't walk in with Orange County, and Orange County can't walk in with LA, and LA can't walk in San Diego, we've already lost. That's why I said the most important thing you did today was not invite me, is that all of you are coming together. If you want more resources and more investment, you got to row in the same direction. And I'll tell you something, and I can't, remember, this is for the state. I can't focus on Southern California. But I'll tell you, you know who does it better than anybody? And I say this everywhere, not just here. It's the Bay Area. If you go to the Bay Area, they have the Bay Area Council, they have the unions, they have the environmental groups, they have every mayor in the surrounding area, they have every assembly member, every state senator, and they had Pelosi and Feinstein. You all can do the same thing. Get everybody in the region that's impacted by this together, and now you're talking about a formidable coalition. So that's why the seeds of what you're doing here is so important. You're not going to do it, San Diego by themselves, Orange County, or even LA County by itself. Because everybody looks at LA County, they get so much, and they say, God, they're getting so much. Well, they're also big. But when you're coming in together, you can all get more resources. This governmental entity issue is a big issue, no question. The other one is the political will. I saw what an activist person, they always talk about the LA mayor's job is a weak mayor's job, and I finally called the LA Times not so long ago because I heard him say it, and I said, did you ever say that when I was mayor? You criticized me because I tried to take over the schools. You criticized me because I led the effort on the MTA. It's like, hey, it's a weak mayor's job if you're a weak mayor. If you're aggressive, we need the political will in this state to start really, in Texas, Democrats and Republicans, they fight just like they do in California. But when it comes to getting money for Texas, they're all like, they're working together, man. There's not red state, blue, they're all together. We have to do the same thing. Start by region. This region is an economic engine for the state, and what you're doing here is really important. Thank you very much.